Ethan had always been a traveler, not the kind who explored new cities or took fancy cruises, but the kind who liked the quiet hum of spaceports, the smell of fuel in the air, and the endless rows of ships waiting to carry people to places they had only dreamed of. Today, however, his adventure started with a mistake. He had been planning to board the interstellar shuttle Aurora to reach the mining colony on Zeta 9, but in the chaos of the busy docking terminal, he misread the signs. One moment he was scanning his boarding pass, and the next he found himself stepping into the wrong ship. At first, he didn't notice anything unusual. The interior was sleek, silver, and quiet, with soft light panels illuminating the corridors. There was no one around in the first few halls he walked. "Strange," he muttered. "Where is everyone?" he called out, but his voice only echoed softly against the metallic walls. Then he reached the central deck and everything changed. A group of figures appeared from the side corridors, moving gracefully and silently toward him. They were all women, or at least they looked like women in shape, but none of them were human. Ethan froze. Their skin shimmered in colors he had never seen: pale blue, soft lavender, even a golden hue that seemed to glow faintly. Their eyes were larger than humans, some with more than one pupil, and their hair, or what seemed like hair, flowed like liquid light. He felt like he had walked straight into a painting, one alive and moving. One of them stepped forward, tall and regal, with a calm yet sharp presence that immediately commanded attention. She raised a hand slightly, and Ethan noticed the others following her lead, forming a semicircle around him. The woman spoke, but her words were strange sounds, melodic and unfamiliar. Ethan frowned, trying to make sense. I think I'm on the wrong ship," he said nervously. "I'm supposed to be on the Aurora. The woman tilted her head, observing him. She spoke again, this time a sound that seemed to vibrate through the air, almost musical. Ethan tried to respond in English again, but it was clear she didn't understand. Panic started to creep in. He had no translator, no backup plan. And yet, something in her gaze stopped him from running. She was assessing him, not threatening him, yet he knew he was being measured in a way humans rarely did. Another figure, smaller and with luminous violet eyes, stepped closer, pointing to the docking log on a holographic screen. The symbols on the screen were alien, but Ethan could tell they were trying to show him that there was no record of a human passenger named Ethan for this ship. I really don't belong here," he said again, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'll leave, I promise. Just tell me how." For a long moment the captain, or whatever she was, studied him silently. Then she finally spoke in tones that Ethan could barely interpret as a question. He shook his head, unsure. The other crew members murmured among themselves, and Ethan realized that even though he didn't understand their language, he could feel the curiosity, caution, and something else, something like amusement, in the air. Finally, the captain extended a hand, not toward him to grab or stop him, but toward a corridor leading deeper into the ship. Ethan hesitated but followed, thinking he might find a place to wait for someone to guide him back. The hallways were unlike any spaceship he had ever seen. Panels shifted colors as he walked, and the floor beneath him seemed to float slightly, as if he were walking on a soft, liquid surface. In one corner, a small garden hovered in midair, with plants that glowed faintly and leaves that moved as if alive. Ethan's curiosity began to replace his nervousness. As they moved deeper, the crew began to observe him more closely. One of the women with skin like silver reached out and handed him a small device. When he touched it, he realized it was a translator of some kind. Symbols and sounds shifted into simple English phrases. "Welcome," it said. "You are unexpected. Observation begins." Ethan swallowed hard. "Observation?" he asked aloud, and the device repeated the word with a slight echo. He looked around and saw the crew watching his every movement. They weren't hostile, but they were certainly cautious. The captain spoke again, and this time the translator worked. We need to understand your mind. Your presence is unusual. You may stay, but movement is monitored. Ethan nodded slowly, trying to hide his growing anxiety. I understand, he said. I'll stay. I won't cause trouble. The crew led him to what seemed like living quarters, but not like anything he had stayed in before. The walls shifted gently to accommodate his height, the bed seemed to float just above the floor, and the lighting adjusted itself to his preferred brightness. He tried to lie down, but curiosity pulled him up again. Everywhere he looked, the ship seemed alive. Panels shifted as he passed, displays appeared with new information, and soft lights followed his movements. As the hours passed, Ethan explored more. He discovered rooms filled with holographic star maps, libraries containing knowledge from across the galaxy, and training halls where the crew practiced movements that looked like a mix of martial arts and dance. He watched in awe as they moved together in perfect synchrony, each action flowing into the next. Every time he made a misstep, one of the crew members would gently correct him, never harshly, just guiding him. By the time the ship's artificial day ended, Ethan had learned a little about them. They were explorers, scientists, and defenders of their civilization. Their mission took them to remote parts of space, often dangerous, and they had little contact with humans. They had rules about outsiders, and Ethan's accidental presence broke every expectation. Yet, as Ethan prepared for a restless sleep on the floating bed, he realized something strange. None of the crew had tried to force him out. None had shown anger or hostility. Instead, they watched, guided, and occasionally smiled in a way that made him feel accepted. Not fully, not yet, but enough that he no longer felt like an intruder. That night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the shifting ceiling lights that simulated a night sky. He thought about his mistake, his wrong turn at the docking terminal, and yet he couldn't shake a feeling of anticipation. Something about this ship, about these alien women, felt significant. He didn't understand it yet, but he felt like he was at the beginning of something much bigger than a simple trip to Zeta 9. When morning came, the crew gathered again. The captain spoke through the translator. Your adaptation begins. You will learn. You may try to leave later, but understanding comes first. Ethan nodded. He had no idea what that fully meant, but he was willing to try. Over the next few hours, he joined them in small tasks, repairing a minor system in the navigation bay, helping calibrate energy modules, and observing how the ship's AI responded to commands. With each small success, the crew's expression softened, and he felt a tentative sense of belonging forming. One crew member, whose skin shimmered like liquid silver, approached him. She handed him a floating sphere that projected a map of nearby star systems. Learn, her translator device said. Be aware, be ready. Ethan studied the map, amazed at the vastness of space, the uncharted territories, and the strange anomalies marked on the display. He realized that even if he had wanted to leave, he now had a choice he hadn't anticipated. Return to the human world he knew, or embrace this unknown life among beings far more advanced and enigmatic than himself. By the end of the first day, Ethan had already made his first mistakes, learned a few skills, and most importantly, had started to earn the crew's cautious trust. He wasn't just a human visitor anymore. He was a presence they were curious about, a mind they wanted to understand, and perhaps someone they might not want to let go. As he drifted into sleep, Ethan felt both excitement and nervousness. He had stepped onto the wrong ship by accident, but for the first time in his life, he wondered if maybe this wrong turn was exactly the adventure he had been searching for. The universe outside promised danger, discovery, and mystery, and for the first time he was ready to meet it, not alone, but with a crew that was as strange, beautiful, and powerful as anything he had ever imagined. The next day began with a soft hum through the ship, a sound that seemed almost alive. Ethan woke on the floating bed, feeling the gentle sway as the ship adjusted its course. He had learned that the artificial day and night cycles were designed to mimic planets, helping the crew maintain their natural rhythms during long voyages. Stretching, he felt a strange mix of comfort and unease. Every time he looked around, he remembered he was still in the wrong ship, surrounded by alien women who could probably outthink him at every turn. Breakfast, if it could be called that, was a curious experience. Floating trays appeared in front of him, filled with shapes and colors that were edible but entirely unfamiliar. Ethan hesitated, staring at a glowing orb that shimmered in red and blue. One of the crew, a shorter woman with eyes like polished amethyst, floated next to him. She mimed eating the orb and then gestured for him to try. Nervously, he took a bite. It exploded in his mouth with a mild sweetness and warmth. He swallowed carefully, and the translator confirmed his reaction. "Understanding progresses," it said. After breakfast, the captain, Lyra, gathered the crew and Ethan in the training bay. The room was enormous, the ceiling rising far above them, with transparent walls giving a clear view of space outside. Ethan noticed a simulation platform at the center, a holographic projection of a nebula filled with energy anomalies and floating debris. "Today, you learn," the translator said. Ethan looked at the crew, realizing that this was not a simple lesson. They wanted to see how he could adapt under pressure. The simulation began, and suddenly the platform beneath him shifted, forcing him to balance as holographic obstacles flew around. At first, Ethan stumbled. He fell once, almost hitting a wall, and the crew murmured. But he didn't panic. Instead, he studied the patterns, watched the way the projections moved, and started anticipating the obstacles. Slowly, his movements became smoother, more confident. The crew observed quietly, only intervening when he veered too close to a dangerous energy field. By the end of the session, Ethan had not only completed the simulation but had done so with a level of creativity the crew hadn't expected. Lyra nodded, a faint smile on her face, and Ethan felt a sense of pride he rarely experienced on Earth. The next hours were filled with learning. Ethan explored the ship's technology with guidance from the crew. One of them, a tall alien with faint golden veins running under her skin, showed him how to interface with the ship's AI. He discovered that the AI could read emotions and adapt the ship's systems accordingly. When he felt nervous, the lights dimmed slightly and the corridors softened their hum. When he felt curiosity, the AI projected floating displays and tools to help him explore. Ethan marveled at the ship. Every room seemed to have its own personality. There was a library filled with holographic books from across galaxies, each page floating in 3 dimensions. There were gardens with plants that glowed in bioluminescent colors, their leaves forming patterns as if in silent communication. In the workshop, alien devices floated in midair, waiting for someone to touch them. Ethan had never seen anything like it. As the day went on, the crew began including him in more serious activities. They were heading to a sector of space known for rare cosmic energy that could power entire planets. The journey was dangerous, and the crew's every action was precise. Ethan assisted in minor maintenance tasks at first, tightening bolts, checking energy conduits, and recalibrating sensors. His hands were clumsy compared to theirs, but he learned quickly, and soon the crew noticed he could think in ways they didn't expect. It was during one of these maintenance sessions that disaster almost struck. A sudden energy surge in the propulsion system caused sparks to fly. One of the crew members moved to contain it, but the surge was stronger than she anticipated. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed a floating tool, adjusted a panel, and rerouted the energy. The system stabilized and the crew stared at him in surprise. The translator chimed, "Quick thinking, unusual but effective." After the incident, the captain spoke privately with Ethan. "Your mind works differently. That is valuable." Ethan nodded, unsure how to respond. He had only acted instinctively using common sense, yet in their eyes it seemed extraordinary. Later, during a break, Ethan floated through the observation deck. The stars outside were unlike anything he had seen. Nebulae glowed with colors that Earth's telescopes could never capture, and distant planets shimmered with faint light. One of the crew floated next to him, pointing toward a cluster of stars. The translator said, "These are dangers and opportunities. Understanding them is part of becoming one with the ship." Ethan felt a thrill. For the first time, he realized that his accidental journey might actually give him a purpose he hadn't had before. Evening came, and the ship entered a region of space filled with cosmic storms. The crew went into action immediately. Ethan was nervous, but he followed instructions precisely, learning quickly how to stabilize energy fields and monitor the storm's fluctuations. Lightning-like energy arcs danced outside the transparent walls, and the ship swayed as it navigated through the turbulence. At one point, a massive surge threatened to disable their navigation system. Ethan remembered a pattern he had observed earlier and suggested a rerouting of energy. The crew implemented it and the ship stabilized. Lyra approached him afterward, her eyes softening. "You saved time, saved effort, saved us." The translator repeated her words. Ethan felt a warmth he had never expected. These beings, so different from humans, had just expressed trust and admiration for him. In the quiet after the storm, Ethan found himself talking with one of the crew members who had taught him to use the AI. She asked him questions about Earth, about his life, about how humans solved problems. Ethan shared simple stories and she listened with fascination. He realized that in their eyes, humans were unpredictable, clever, and sometimes remarkably resilient. It struck him that he was not just learning from them, they were learning from him too. Over the following days, the bond grew. Ethan learned alien customs, their ways of teamwork, and how to anticipate dangers that humans had never faced. He trained with them in zero-gravity simulations, practiced emergency maneuvers, and even learned to communicate with the ship's AI using a mix of thought and gesture. Each day, the crew's subtle approval became more evident. Small smiles, nods, and gestures that once seemed alien now felt like acknowledgement of his place among them. One evening, the ship passed through a field of drifting asteroids. The crew prepared for evasive maneuvers. Ethan noticed a pattern in the movement of the larger asteroids and shouted a suggestion to Lyra. She hesitated for a moment, then implemented his advice. The ship sailed through safely, and the crew's expressions were a mix of surprise and respect. The translator said, "Human insight valuable." Ethan realized then that he was no longer just a guest or an intruder. His presence mattered. That night, Ethan floated to his quarters, exhausted but exhilarated. He reflected on the past days. What had started as a mistake, boarding the wrong ship, had become a journey of learning, adaptation, and growing respect. He thought about the crew, their beauty, their skill, and their intelligence. He had expected fear, conflict, or rejection, but instead he found acceptance, trust, and a strange sense of belonging. As he drifted to sleep, he realized the truth. He was no longer just a human visitor. He was part of something larger, something interstellar and extraordinary. The alien crew had not just tolerated him, they had challenged him, taught him, and perhaps even come to rely on him in ways he could barely understand. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, a reminder of the vastness of space and the countless adventures that lay ahead. Ethan knew that whatever the future held, cosmic storms, hostile encounters, or new discoveries, he would face it alongside this remarkable crew. He was no longer just a human in a galaxy of aliens. He was someone who had earned his place among them, and they had begun to see him as more than a mistake. The ship's gentle hum seemed to echo his thoughts, as if agreeing. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt that he was exactly where he was meant to be, even if he hadn't meant to be there at all. The ship glided silently through the dark expanse of space, its hull shimmering faintly under the distant stars. Ethan floated through the corridors, feeling more at home than he had ever felt anywhere on Earth. The last few days had been intense, full of learning, adapting, and forming bonds with the alien crew, but he knew the greatest challenges were still ahead. Lyra, the captain, gathered the crew in the central deck, and the holographic map lit up with the glow of an approaching sector. Ethan peered at the projection. He could see the swirling mass of cosmic energy they were heading toward. This region was unstable, full of rogue asteroids, energy surges, and unpredictable gravitational fields. Even for the experienced crew, navigating it would require every skill they had. "You have learned quickly," Lyra said, her voice calm but commanding. The translator echoed her words. "Now your abilities will be tested. We face danger and we must rely on all members." Ethan's heart raced. He had learned a lot, but nothing in his human experience had prepared him for this. Yet he felt ready. He had adapted, observed, and proven himself in small crises. This was the moment to show that he belonged. The ship entered the sector, and immediately alarms blared. Energy surges pulsed around them, and floating debris moved unpredictably. Ethan grabbed a nearby console, scanning for patterns. His human intuition, combined with what he had learned from the crew, helped him see a path through the chaos. "Lyra, angle the shields and rotate the ship slightly," he called out, pointing to a safer trajectory. The crew glanced at him in surprise. Lyra hesitated for a fraction of a second, then executed his suggestion. The ship swerved gracefully, dodging an incoming energy wave that would have struck them head-on. A wave of relief passed through Ethan, and the crew exchanged looks that were a mix of admiration and astonishment. As they moved deeper into the sector, a massive energy anomaly appeared ahead, brighter and larger than anything Ethan had ever seen. The ship trembled as gravitational fluctuations threatened to pull them in. Ethan and the crew worked together, adjusting energy shields, redirecting power, and calculating escape routes. The tension was palpable, but for the first time, Ethan felt fully capable, fully part of this extraordinary team. Hours passed in a blur of activity. Ethan used his unique perspective to suggest solutions that the crew hadn't considered. His instincts, honed by human unpredictability, complemented their precise and calculated approach. Slowly, they navigated through the anomaly, emerging on the other side battered but intact. The stars beyond seemed to shine brighter, as if congratulating them on their survival. In the calm that followed, Lyra floated to him, her eyes meeting his through the soft glow of the deck. "You are remarkable," she said simply. The translator confirmed her words. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest, a sense of belonging he had never known. The crew gathered around, their expressions softening. No longer were they cautious observers. Now they were teammates, allies, and friends. That night, Ethan reflected on the journey so far. What had started as an accident, boarding the wrong ship, had transformed into a profound adventure. He had learned alien technology, navigated dangers humans could hardly imagine, and formed bonds with beings more intelligent and capable than most humans he knew. Yet the greatest change was internal. He no longer felt like a visitor or a mistake. He was part of something larger, a living, breathing ship crew that valued him not for his species, but for his courage, ingenuity, and heart. Days passed, and Ethan continued to integrate fully with the crew. They shared their history, showing him images of distant worlds, teaching him alien strategies for exploration and defense, and explaining the importance of their mission. In turn, Ethan shared stories of Earth, of human problem-solving, creativity, and resilience. The crew listened with fascination, realizing that humans, though fragile, were capable of surprising ingenuity. One morning, while the ship drifted near a luminous nebula, an alert signaled a potential threat, a fleet of unknown vessels approaching. The crew went into immediate defensive formation, preparing for possible combat. Ethan's pulse quickened. He had trained with them, but this was real danger, not simulations. Lyra spoke calmly, issuing orders that were precise and deliberate. Ethan found his role instinctively, monitoring energy flows and suggesting adjustments that helped maintain shields and stabilize the ship's trajectory. The alien fleet tested them, firing energy pulses that could have shredded their hull, but thanks to teamwork and Ethan's insight, the ship remained unscathed. After hours of tense maneuvering, the fleet retreated, likely assessing that this ship was not an easy target. The crew exhaled collectively, and Ethan felt a swell of pride. They had faced real danger, and he had contributed meaningfully. Later, as the crew relaxed in the observation deck, Lyra floated next to him. "You have chosen to stay," she said softly. The translator repeated her words. Ethan nodded. He realized that leaving Earth, leaving the human world behind, was no longer a burden but a choice to explore, to grow, and to belong. The crew watched him, not with suspicion but with genuine curiosity and trust. They began to include him in strategic discussions, decision-making, and even planning for future missions. Ethan's mind, human and flexible, offered perspectives that complemented their precise logic. Together, they became more than a ship and a visitor. They became a team capable of handling the unknown. One evening, while navigating a region rich with rare cosmic minerals, Ethan noticed a fluctuation in the ship's sensors. A mining asteroid was drifting too close, threatening to collide with the hull. He shouted suggestions, and the crew executed them. The asteroid's trajectory shifted just in time, and the ship passed safely. Lyra's expression was unreadable, but the translator repeated a single phrase: "Your presence saves." Ethan realized then that the alien crew had come to depend on him, not just for his actions, but for his thinking. His unpredictability, once considered a liability, had become an asset. He had earned a place among them, not as a mistake or an outsider, but as an essential member. As the ship continued its journey, Ethan began to explore more of the crew's culture. He learned their games, their ways of celebrating discoveries, and even their subtle humor. They taught him to communicate with the ship's AI through thought patterns, something humans had never attempted before. Slowly, he began to see the ship as alive, responsive not just to commands but to emotions, intentions, and creativity. One night, as he floated in the observation deck, staring at the swirling stars, Lyra approached. She gestured toward the stars, then at him. The translator said simply, "The universe is vast. You may choose to leave or stay. The choice is yours, but know that your place is here." Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. Leaving would mean returning to the familiar, the safe, the human. Staying would mean embracing the unknown, living with beings far more advanced than himself, and facing challenges no human had ever imagined. Yet, he realized that for the first time in his life, he did not want the familiar. He wanted this adventure, this purpose, this family among the stars. "I choose to stay," he said finally, his voice steady. The translator repeated the words. The crew's expressions softened, some nodding, some smiling. Lyra's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer, and then she simply said, "Welcome." From that moment, Ethan was no longer a visitor. He was part of the crew, a human among aliens, a mind and heart valued for its courage, ingenuity, and humanity. The ship hummed around him, as if acknowledging his choice, ready to carry him and the crew to new adventures across the stars. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan grew more confident in his role. He navigated asteroid fields, assisted in energy harvesting from cosmic storms, and even helped solve problems that had baffled the crew for years. The alien women had not just accepted him. They relied on him, trusted him, and treated him as one of their own. One quiet evening, as the ship drifted through a calm sector, Ethan floated through the corridors, observing the crew working and laughing in their unique ways. He realized that this accidental boarding had changed him entirely. He had come aboard by mistake, but he had stayed by choice. He had left behind the predictable world of Earth, only to find purpose, friendship, and a family in the unlikeliest of places. For the first time, he understood something profound. Humanity's value was not in strength or technology alone, but in curiosity, courage, and the ability to adapt. That had earned him a place among these incredible beings. That had made him indispensable. The stars stretched endlessly outside, promising countless adventures. Ethan knew the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, discoveries, and dangers. Yet, for the first time, he felt ready for anything. He was no longer just a human traveling through space. He was part of something greater, a story unfolding among the stars, a mind and spirit recognized and respected by beings beyond imagination. And as the ship sailed silently into the unknown, Ethan smiled. He had boarded the wrong ship, yes, but he had found the right place, the right people, and a life he could have never dreamed of on Earth. He was home among the stars.